Welcome back to Philosophizing with a Hammer. In our last episodes, we explored Kafka's The Trial and also examined Foucault's concept of the panopticon through an existentialist lens. Then we turned to the Metamorphosis, one of the most haunting and absurd yet deeply existential stories ever written. Today, we are continuing our series on existentialism, and we're going to look at the guy who is often associated with the phrase existence precedes essence, Jean-Paul Sartre. So, one might ask, what does that actually mean? Why is Being and Nothingness considered one of the most important philosophical texts of the 20th century by Jean-Paul Sartre? And most importantly, why does it still matter in 2025? So let's dive in. Jean-Paul Sartre was a towering intellectual figure of the 20th century whose influence extended far beyond philosophy into literature, politics, and culture. Born in 1905, Sartre grew up in France, yet he was still suffering from World War I, but it was World War II that would profoundly shape his worldview. As a prisoner of war and later an active member of the French Renaissance, Sartre directly experienced the existential shakes of freedom, as well as responsibility and oppression, which are key themes that permeate his work. One of his key ideas, you have radical freedom. The absence of a predefined human nature, and as well as the burden of responsibility that comes with creating our own essence. At the heart of Sartre's existentialism is the radical claim that existence precedes essence. But to fully understand this idea, we must first explore its antithesis, the traditional philosophical and also theological position that states essence precedes existence. Essence, basically, that is the search for, not the search, but let's say the meaning itself, and existence is being thrown into this world from a Heideggerian perspective. And this older view that says essence precedes existence has deep roots in classical and medieval thought, particularly in the philosophies of Plato, as well as later Christian theology. In this framework, everything, including human beings, has an inherent essence, a predefined nature that determines what it is and how it should function. Just as a knife is designed with the purpose of cutting, humans, according to this view, have an essence that dictates their moral and existential trajectory. And according to Plato, let's have a look at his philosophy. Briefly, because it's unfair to talk about all of his philosophy in just one episode. So we might devote separate episodes to Plato and all the other pre- and post-Platonic philosophers after the journey of existential series in here. Let me know what you think. Going back to Plato, he argued that everything in the material world is a mere imperfect reflection of an ideal form, a perfect, unchanging essence that exists beyond time and space. Aristotle, his successor, built upon this, claiming that all beings have a telos, which means a built-in purpose they are meant to fulfill. This notion carried over into Christian philosophy, where it took on a theological dimension. Human essence was seen as defined by God, who created individuals with a specific moral and existential purpose. From this perspective, our identities and destinies are, to some degree, predetermined. We are discovered rather than created as far as our own choices are concerned. For centuries, this view dominated Western thought. It was reassuring, offering stability in a seemingly chaotic world. Life is harsh, but hey, you have heaven afterwards, so no worries. If essence precedes existence, then there is a moral order, a meaning to life, and a way to judge whether one is living correctly or not. Philosophers and theologians saw deviations from this predefined nature, whether in morality or personal identity. They saw them as errors or even sins. But Sartre, following the existentialist tradition of Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, rejected this idea outright. He argued that human beings are not like tools or objects with a fixed design. Instead, we are thrown into this world without a predetermined essence, and it is only through our actions and our choices that we define who we are. From Heideggerian perspective, we are thrown into this world, and it is our job, it is our duty to find meaning and create meaning out of it. In other words, it's now existence that precedes essence. We exist first, and only afterwards do we construct our own meaning, our own identity, and our purpose as well. This existentialist stance fundamentally alters our understanding of, let's say, freedom and responsibility. If our essence were predetermined either by nature or society or divine will or whatever, then we could appeal to those existential let's call them external, because they're not internal, those external forces to justify our actions. But if there is no inherent essence, then we are entirely responsible for what we become. Sartre's famous declaration that we are condemned to be free stems from this realization. Our freedom is absolute, but with that comes the unbearable weight of responsibility. There is no script, no cosmic blueprint, and no moral law inscribed into the universe that tells us what to do. We must create meaning ourselves, knowing that every choice contributes to shaping our essence. This is also why Sartre's existentialism focuses heavily on the notion of bad faith. That is, the act of self-deception in which individuals try to avoid the burden of their own freedom by pretending that their life choices are dictated by the external forces. That is, if God chooses this for me, then okay, he knows better, and I'm going to accept it. It's from a Nietzschean perspective, the morality of the slave. Whether it is the worker who says, I have no choice but to stay in this job, or the citizen who claims politics is beyond my control, Sartre sees these as forms of inauthenticity, ways people deny their own agency to escape the anxiety of responsibility. Accordingly, Sartre's existentialism directly opposes the idea that essence precedes existence, viewing it as a comforting but ultimately deceptive belief that keeps individuals from recognizing their true freedom. In a world that has seen war, genocide, authoritarianism, things that are still happening nowadays, where traditional moral frameworks have collapsed, Sartre's work stands as a challenge. If existence comes first, then what essence will you create for yourself? Looking at his work, Being and Nothingness, one of my favorite books by Sartre, published in 1943, Being and Nothingness is Sartre's ambitious and dense exploration of human existence in a universe that offers no inherent meaning, no guiding essence, and no preordained path. It is not merely a philosophical treatise, but a radical rethinking of what it means to be, to exist as a conscious, to exist as someone who is self-aware in a world that is, at its core, indifferent. Sartre takes these existentialist ideas of Heidegger and pushes them further, sharpening them to become a philosophy of radical freedom and responsibility. At the heart of Being and Nothingness lies a fundamental distinction between two types of being: Being in itself, être en soi, or being for itself, être pour soi, French translation. So, being with a capital B is a famous concept that Heidegger's translators often keep to distinguish it between a being with lowercase b. Being with a capital B is the state of being thrown into the world and trying to find meaning and trying to find what is intelligible in this existence. And being in itself refers to objects, things that are simply are. However, being for itself is the mode of existence that applies to conscious beings, to us. So we can understand being in itself as the objects that are simply existing, like a rock, a chair, a tree, a desk, etc. These exist without self-awareness, without a choice. They are solid and complete. A chair does not question why is it a chair. It simply exists as one. However, being for itself, it's not like a tree or a rock. It is a human consciousness. It is never fixed or fully determined. It is dynamic, always in motion, always becoming, never stable, always in search for meaning. But what truly defines being for itself is its unique capacity for negation. That is the ability to not be something, to imagine something different, to reject the status quo. Unlike a chair that is bound to its nature and limited to that, a human being is never truly one thing. At every moment, we have the ability to redefine ourselves, to make our choices, and to become something else. So, we can conclude that human consciousness is nothing. Here's why Sartre makes this claim, and it's one of his most radical claims: human consciousness is nothing. That may sound strange or even bleak at first, but it is in fact the very foundation of our freedom. To understand this, let's contrast it with traditional views of human nature. Many philosophical and religious traditions argue that we are something. We are something that means we have an essence and a core identity, whether determined by God or reason or nature. But Sartre argues the opposite. Consciousness is a void, an emptiness, precisely because it is not pre-programmed with a fixed nature. It is an open space in which choices are made and in which identities are constructed. Think of consciousness like an open road. A road does not lead anywhere until a person decides which way to go. In the same way, a human consciousness does not come with a built-in instructions. It is a space of possibilities, always awaiting to be filled by action and choice. And this, as Sartre argues, is the terrifying and exhilarating truth. We are condemned to be free. So, what does it mean to be condemned to be free? Sartre chooses his words carefully here. He focuses on the weight of choice, freedom as a burden. He goes not to say we are blessed with freedom, he says we are condemned to it. That's because freedom is not an easy gift. It is a crushing responsibility. If there is no God, no universal morality, no cosmic plan, then the burden of meaning is fallen entirely upon us. There is no external authority to tell us who we are or what we should do. We are fully responsible for our own lives, and this is something haunting. As children, we all had to obey some rules, in which we first didn't like to do that. We wanted to be free and everything, and then by and by, growing up and stepping into adulthood, you start to experience how life is really something harsh, something difficult, you wish there is someone to guide you, to help you decide what to do. Not decide for you, but at least help you some way or another, because the burden of responsibility is so heavy. And yet, despite this freedom, most of us run from it. Freedom is something overwhelming. If we accept it fully, we must confront the fact that everything on our lives, our job, our life, our relationships, our ambitions, our dreams, they are the result of choices we have to make every day. But instead of embracing this reality, most people engage in what Sartre calls bad faith, la mauvaise foi in French. And we can relate this idea to what we discussed in earlier episodes by Nietzsche, the idea of the eternal recurrence. Although Nietzsche published his work many years before Sartre, yet he kind of gives a solution. Imagine that you're going to live the same day that you are going through right now forever, for eternity. Would you like to do it? Yes or no? Most people would say no. I want something new every day. Nietzsche would say, well, you have to say yes. Why? Because the idea that you're going to live forever, the same exact day, is the exact motivation you need to be productive and to take the right decisions every day. You're going to wake up in the morning and you're going to have the idea that from now on till the moment you go to sleep is basically your life for the next endless years. And so you're going to take your choices carefully and you're going to be as productive as possible. You're going to try to do things that you love. So in this way, you're going to enjoy doing them. And if you're going to keep doing this every day, you don't have to worry about the future. You don't have to worry about what kind of future lies ahead in front of you, because you're already doing your best every day. And I'd like you to think about this from now on. Whenever you wake up in the morning, imagine that you're going to live this day exactly as it is for the rest of your life. And try to make the best out of it. All of those, tasks that you have delayed, that you put off for later, all of those, hours of Instagram scrolling or stuff like that, you're going to reconsider all of it. And you're going to make the best of your day. And do that again the next day, and again. And it'll become a habit. And in this way, we are literally escaping the bad faith that Sartre uses. In other words, the type of nihilism that Nietzsche talked about. Bad faith, according to Sartre, is actually the act of deceiving yourself in order to escape the weight of freedom. It is the lie we tell ourselves that we have no choice, that we are trapped by our circumstances, that we must live in a certain way. It is when we surrender our agency and pretend that external forces like society or our responsibilities are making choices for us, and not the other way around. A classic example of bad faith is the waiter in Being and Nothingness. Imagine a waiter who moves too precisely, speaks too formally, and acts like a waiter than a human being. Sartre argues that this person is performing a role, reducing himself to a mere function. Instead of embracing his full human freedom, he's pretending that he's just a waiter, as if that identity were fixed. But he's not just a waiter. He's a conscious being who chooses to be a waiter. The problem is not his job, the problem is his self-deception. Another example, a person stuck in an unfulfilling job might say, I have to stay, I have no other option. Sartre would respond, this is bad faith. You always have a choice. Staying is a decision, even if it is difficult. Bad faith takes many forms. We can look at it as the person who stays in an unhappy relationship but tells themselves, it's too late to change. It's also the citizen who ignores injustice, saying, that's just the way things are. As well as the individual who follows orders blindly, claiming, I was just doing my job. And we've all encountered those people. Maybe we have been one of them too. But each of them is an act of self-deception, according to Sartre, a refusal to acknowledge one's own freedom and responsibility. Now, some might argue that Sartre's view of freedom is naive. What about those who are oppressed? What about those who truly have no control of their circumstances? Sartre acknowledges that external forces like war, like poverty, they can limit our options, but he insists that even within these constraints, there is still a choice. Even in a prison cell, he goes a bit to exaggerating here, but he says, even in a prison cell, one can choose how to face suffering. Just like Sisyphus, who chooses to be happy regardless of his task of carrying the rock every day up the mountain. He chooses to be happy because being happy is an act of rebellion. Sartre himself lived this philosophy during World War II. He wasn't just a writer who was, sitting in his bedroom and writing and witnessing from far. No, he was experiencing this exact philosophy during World War II. While France was occupied by the Nazis, he did not accept that he was powerless. He wrote, he resisted, he took action. He believed that passivity in the face of oppression is a choice, and that individuals must confront even the harshest realities with authenticity. This message remains very relevant today, in 2025, as we face authoritarianism, economic inequality and climate crisis and countless wars that are currently happening across the world, a genocide, and all of that. Sartre's philosophy challenges us. Are we living authentically, or are we hiding behind excuses? Are we making choices, or are we letting the world define us? In the end, Being and Nothingness is more than just philosophical work. It is a call to action. And Sartre does not give easy answers, but he makes one thing clear. You are free, whether you like it or not. The question is, what will you do with that freedom? This type of existentialism is both exhilarating and terrifying because it strips away all external justifications and places the full weight of responsibility on the individual. If you are truly free, then every action, every choice, no matter how small it is something for which we are alone responsible for. There are no excuses, no divided plan, and no predetermined destiny to fall back on. This is a radical departure from many philosophical and religious traditions. In most belief systems, human actions are either guided by a higher power or by an inherent moral order. Christianity, for example, poses a defined plan. Platonism speaks of an eternal realm of ideal forms. Even Kantian ethics assumes a universal moral law derived from pure reason. But Sartre dismantles all of that. There is no ground design, no essence that dictates our purpose, and no cosmic safety that ensures that things will turn out the way they are meant to be. Instead, Sartre argues that we are thrown into the existence first, and only afterward we begin to define ourselves through our choices. This is the essence of his famous dictum, existence precedes essence. Now, think of what this really means. It is easy to say that we are free, but true freedom is not always liberating. It can be paralyzing. If there is no God or inherent meaning, then the burden of defining meaning falls entirely on us. That's an immense responsibility. Every decision you make, every time you choose comfort over change, silence over speaking, and routine over risk, you are not just making a casual choice. You are creating yourself in that moment. You are defining who you are. There is no existential and any other authority to dictate what you should do. That weight is yours alone to carry. This is what makes Sartrean existentialism both terrifying and empowering. There is no one to blame but yourself. If your life lacks meaning, it is because you haven't created it. Even if you feel trapped, it is because you are choosing to remain in that trap. Even if circumstances are difficult, even if social or economic conditions limit your options, you still have the ability to choose your attitude, your response with your actions. Most people, Sartre argues, they cannot bear this burden. They would say, I have no choice. But here's the paradox. While freedom can feel overwhelming, embracing that freedom is the only way to live authentically. If we accept that we are responsible for our choices, then life can be incredibly rich and meaningful. Sartre is not saying that life is meaningless. He is saying that meaning is not given, it must be created. To live authentically means to take responsibility for who we are becoming. It means recognizing that we are always in the process of defining ourselves through our actions. Every moment is an opportunity to become something different, something more. This has a profound implications for how we live today. In a world where many people feel powerless, Sartre's existentialism challenges us. Are you truly powerless? Are you in a position where you cannot do anything? Or are you in a bad faith? Are you making choices that reflect who you want to be? Or are you letting external forces dictate your life? Consider the political climate of 2025. Across the world, authoritarianism is on the rise, and many people feel as though their voices do not matter. It is tempting to surrender to despair, to say, there is nothing I can do. But Sartre would argue that even in oppression, there is always a choice. Even under restrictive regimes, people have the ability to resist, to speak out, and to act in ways that affirm their freedom. The question is, will they accept responsibility for their choices, or will they retreat into bad faith? Sartre's message here becomes clear. There is no escape from freedom. You are free, like it or not. The only question is whether you will embrace that freedom authentically or hide from it. Now, let's bring this into today's world. Why Sartre still matters in 2025? In a hyper-connected world where our identities are often shaped by algorithms and all of that, Sartre's existentialist philosophy remains profoundly relevant, in which his assertion that existence precedes essence challenges us to recognize that we are not born with a predetermined purpose. Instead, we continuously define ourselves through our actions and choices. Consider the recent events in Serbia. In March 2025, over 100,000 people took to the streets of Belgrade in one of the largest anti-government protests in decades. These demonstrators rallied against systematic corruption and the administration of President Aleksandar Vučić. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. They demanded transparency, justice, and democratic reforms. Their recollective action exemplifies Sartre's concept of embracing freedom and responsibility. And by choosing to protest, these individuals acknowledged their capacity to influence political structures, refusing to accept passivity in the face of perceived injustice. I chose this example because it was very recent when I was doing the research for this episode. And it kind of fits here very, very well. However, not everyone responds to such situations with activism. Many may feel powerless, believing that their individual actions cannot affect change. This sentiment aligns with what Sartre describes as bad faith, where individuals deny their inherent freedom by attributing their circumstances to external forces beyond their control. By claiming powerlessness, they abdicate responsibility for their choices, thus living inauthentically. Sartre's philosophy urges us to confront this tendency. He posits that we are condemned to be free, meaning that in every situation, regardless of external constraints, we have the freedom to choose our response. This freedom is both a burden and an opportunity. It requires us to acknowledge that our actions, our inactions actually, define our essence. And in the context of the Serbian protests, even those who choose not to participate made a choice that contributes to their self definition. In our daily lives, this philosophy challenges us to reflect on how we engage with social issues. Do we remain passive, believing that problems like corruption or inequality are beyond our influence? Or do we recognize our freedom to act and to make choices that align with our values and to take responsibility for the world we help create? Sartre's existentialism, therefore, is not an abstract doctrine, but a practical guide urging us to live authentically. It calls us to acknowledge our freedom, accept the weight of our choices, and actively participate in shaping our individual and collective existence. In 2025, as we navigate complex social and political landscapes, Sartre's insights remind us that the essence of our humanity lies in the continuous act of choosing and re-choosing who we are. Sartre forces us to ask, are we living authentically, or are we hiding behind excuses? This question is at the core of Being and Nothingness, and by extension, existentialist thought. It is an unsettling question because it places the burden of responsibility squarely on our shoulders. It compels us to strip away the confronting narratives that we tell ourselves, the ideas that our paths are predetermined, as well as that we are bound by circumstances that force us beyond our control and they dictate who we are. Sartre rejects all of that. He rejects these illusions, and instead he argues that we are entirely responsible for who we become. Authenticity in Sartre's terms means living with a full awareness that we are free and that every decision we make shapes our essence. But this is no easy task. We live in a world overflowing with distractions and external expectations and subtle or not so subtle pressures that push us toward conformity. Social media bombards us with curated versions of other people's lives, reinforcing artificial standards of success and happiness. Institutions, on the other hand, tell us who we are and who we are supposed to be, whether through cultural norms, religious doctrines, or political ideologies. We can look also at economic pressures, which often make us feel as though we have no choice but to take a job we dislike and remain in a situation that stifles us or suppress parts of ourselves to fit into a mold that wasn't designed for us. Sartre would argue all of these are excuses, manifestations of bad faith or self-deception. When we say, I can't quit my job because I have no other option, or I can't pursue my passion because society won't accept me, or I have no control over what happens to me, we are engaging into a bad faith. We are predetermining and, let's say, pretending actually and faking the way that we are fixed beings with predefined roles, instead of acknowledging that at every moment we are actively choosing who we are through our actions. Living authentically, thus, means recognizing and embracing this radical freedom. It means making conscious choices instead of defaulting to the path of least resistance. This does not mean freedom is always pleasant. It comes with anxiety and doubt. Sartre describes this as being condemned to be free, as we saw. Unlike a stone or a tree, which is simply is, we have no fixed essence. We must create ourselves through our choices. And those choices matter. From the least, let's say, important choice you make, all the way to the most important choice of your life. Even inaction is a choice. Remaining silent in the face of injustice is a choice. Prioritizing comfort over truth is also a choice. So when Sartre forces us to ask, are we living authentically, or are we hiding behind excuses? He isn't asking a purely intellectual question. He is calling us to action. He is demanding that we examine our lives with brutal honesty and take ownership of who we are. And in a time when distractions and external pressures make it easier than ever, actually, to slip into bad faith, this question becomes even more urgent. Are we defining ourselves through deliberate, meaningful choices, or are we allowing others to define us? Are we crafting our own essence, or are we letting convenience dictate our lives? It is an existential question and an existential challenge, one that Sartre never intended to be comfortable. But if we take it seriously, it has the potential to transform who we are and transform the way we live. So I leave you with this. If existence precedes essence, then what essence are you choosing to create? Thanks for tuning in to Philosophizing with a Hammer. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with someone who loves a good existential crisis. Until next time, we're gonna jump into Martin Heidegger, the German philosopher, mostly known for the philosophy of authenticity, something we discussed a bit today. Until next time, stay authentic. Signing off.